Hello, this is Patrick Barnard in Montreal. It is Friday, October 31st, 2025. This is the 26th International Press Review, and today's topic is Murder on the High Seas. That clip that you've just seen comes from CNN. It's a short little pocket video that also appeared on social media. But this story really came to a head in the middle of last month in October with some sensational, good, solid reporting from the New York Times we're going to talk about. But first, let's take a look at a clip from NBC that gives you the feeling from last week.
The U.S. military has attacked another alleged drug-carrying boat in the Caribbean. This morning, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth wrote on X that 6 people were killed overnight in a strike on a boat that he said was operated by Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. He did not offer evidence to support that claim. It is the 5th time this week and the 10th time overall that the U.S. has struck a vessel that it says was involved in drug trafficking. At least 43 people have been killed in those strikes. This morning, the Pentagon also announced the U.S. is moving an aircraft carrier strike group to the waters off of South America.
The photograph you have just seen is of the United States aircraft carrier Gerald R. Ford. It's the largest ship in the United States Navy. It is nuclear powered, able to launch about 70 aircraft from its decks. It's moving to the Caribbean area. There are already 10,000 U.S. troops in the region, mostly based in Puerto Rico, and the United States in the last month or plus has killed approximately 61 individuals and small ships in the Caribbean and off the Pacific Northwest coast of Latin America. Al Jazeera's John Hendren is in Puerto Rico and has filed a very interesting report for Al Jazeera.
With thousands of newly arrived American troops on the ground and the most lethal ship in the world on its way, the aircraft carrier Gerald R. Ford, Puerto Ricans see a familiar pattern. U.S. troops have descended on Puerto Rico before, ahead of invasions of the Dominican Republic in 1965.
Events soon outran our hopes for peace.
Grenada in 1983.
To restore order and democracy to Grenada.
And Panama in 1989.
To defend democracy in Panama.
Now the surging U.S. forces are stationed here on land and on ships in the Caribbean with their sights set on Venezuela. On the ground, the U.S. aircraft are using 2 American bases that have been closed for years, flying attack and reconnaissance drones from the Ramey Air Force Base and flying missions from Roosevelt Roads Naval Station. After years of protests against the U.S. military presence in Puerto Rico, the Roosevelt Roads Naval Station closed in 2004, but now it's been reactivated. And for many here, the sight of military planes and helicopters brings back some unwelcome memories.
These lethal attacks, though done in the name of the war against drugs, are actually extrajudicial. And there are a number of voices within the United States asking that there be a declaration of war or some equivalent to justify these activities. The reaction of President Trump has been extraordinary. I've been covering the United States as a journalist more or less for all of my life. I've never, ever seen a president use this kind of language.
Mr. President, if you are declaring war against these cartels and Congress is likely to approve of that process, why not just ask for a declaration of war?
Well, I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. Okay? We're going to kill them. You know, they're going to be like dead.
The gap between words and action, the gap between saying you're saving Americans from drug deaths in the United States and carrying out military attacks on small vessels in international waters. That gap indicates that something quite different has been going on. The picture that you see on the screen here is the reproduction of the New York Times article on October 15, 2025 by the two journalists who broke this story. You can see my little scribbles on this copy. The headline reads, "Trump administration authorizes covert CIA action in Venezuela." The development comes as the U.S. military is drawing up options for President Trump to consider, including possible strikes inside the country. The two reporters are Julian E. Barnes, he's a national security expert, and Tyler Pager, he's the White House correspondent of The Times. I'm going to read the first couple of paragraphs. So it opens, the Trump administration has secretly authorized the CIA to conduct covert action in Venezuela, according to U.S. officials, stepping up a campaign against Nicolas Maduro, the country's authoritarian leader. The authorization is the latest step in the Trump administration's intensifying pressure campaign against Venezuela. Mr. Trump acknowledged on Wednesday that he had authorized the covert action and said the United States was considering strikes on Venezuelan territory. On October 17, 2025, the New York Times continued this coverage that had begun in the middle of the week. This time, the correspondent Tyler Pager was joined by Eric Schmidt. He's a veteran reporter about national security on the Times. And here's the front page story. I'm reading it now. And the headline is, U.S. Admiral in boat strikes exits abruptly. And it is about a United States Admiral, the head of Southern Command, I'm going to explain that in a moment, who resigned as a result of this new strategy against Venezuela itself. I'm going to read the key elements of the story. It begins, Washington. The military commander overseeing the Pentagon's escalating attacks against boats in the Caribbean Sea that the Trump administration says are smuggling drugs said on Thursday that he was stepping down. The officer, Admiral Alvin Holsey, is leaving his job as head of the U.S. Southern Command. Admiral Holsey has raised concern about the mission and the attacks on the alleged drug boats. I really like the picture the New York Times has run with this story in the inside page of it. Admiral Holsey in the picture looks very stern and even angry, and that's what the story is about. His resignation, which took place, says the New York Times, one day after it broke the story about the CIA operation going on against Venezuela. According to the Times, there's three things here. Number one, the attacks on the small vessels in the Caribbean were carried out by a unit of the U.S. military called the Special Operations Force. But, says the Times, Admiral Holsey was basically kept out of the loop as far as these operations were concerned. Secondly, when he left, he gave his troops that he was leaving behind because of resignation a note of encouragement, but that masks, says the New York Times, the fact that Admiral Holsey disagreed with the orders he was receiving from his civilian boss. And that civilian boss was the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Hegseth. And the third element in this story is a short comment, which I, for some reason, think was probably written by Eric Schmidt, the veteran national security reporter. And it reads as follows. As a matter of international law, for a non-state group to qualify as a belligerent in an armed conflict, it must be an, quote, organized armed group, unquote, with a centralized command structure and engaging in hostilities, close quote. Now, none of those things obtain in this case. And what the Times is saying here is that these attacks are against international law. And that is one of the reasons why the Admiral resigned. The diagram that you're seeing on your screen and that I'm looking at on my computer right now shows the 7 commands of the United States military, including U.S. Space Command. And right next to U.S. Southern Command, which was the command that the admiral was in charge of, are the Presidential Combatant Commands, and first in line there as U.S. Special Operations Command. Now, what has occurred in the last couple of weeks and more is that U.S. Special Operations Command has been used by Secretary Hegseth and the Trump administration essentially to go around the Admiral Halsey, who was in charge of Southern Command. That obviously was an extremely dangerous situation for him. And his situation now, which he's resolved by leaving, is illustrative of something else, a very, very deep concern in the United States military about President Trump and the Trump administration, because military officers take an oath to stay loyal to the United States Constitution, not to individuals.